At Ritual, we know what goes into the holiday season: the potluck planning, the gift giving, the spreadsheets. So this new year, take a moment for yourself with science-backed support that puts you first. So whether you're focusing on supporting foundational health with a clean vegan multivitamin or supporting your gut health with Symbiotic Plus, do it with 30% off your first month at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Big shout out to you for making it through the hectic holiday season. This new year, get clean, quality, pregnancy nutrient support off your to-do list, including Ritual's best-selling Essential Prenatal Multivitamin, designed with 12 traceable key ingredients to support a healthy pregnancy. With big changes coming up, take the small steps now and start today with 30% off a 3-month supply at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. At Ritual, we know what goes into a magical holiday season: the potluck planning, the gift giving, the spreadsheets. This new year, take a moment for yourself with simple daily rituals that help you put your foundational health at the top of your to-do list. Ritual's Essential for Women 18 Plus multivitamin is a clinically backed multivitamin featuring 9 high-quality key essential ingredients to help you fill key nutrient gaps in your diet. Or maybe you're stressing your daily protein intake, or you want to double down on support for your gut microbiome. From plant-based essential protein to 3-in-1 pre, pro, and postbiotic strains with Symbiotic Plus, Ritual helps you focus on supporting your body after a long season of juggling everybody else. And for a limited time, do it with 30% off a 3-month supply at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Sexual misconduct, a history of sexual misconduct in the Catholic Church that has been covered up for many, many years. This is a very serious topic, very heavy. And of course, I'm pleased to welcome on the show to discuss this with me, Ed Opperman. Welcome to Now You See TV, Ed.
Hey, Mr. Grant, thank you so much.
Now, this topic, I think, is something that is on the forefront of people's minds, just because it's now going out over the mainstream media. And I think it's really important that we break down. You've done a lot of research already into kind of the documents behind this event that's going on concurrently, and also how it ties in politically. There's a lot of sexual misconduct that's going on and a lot of cover-up that goes to protect these pedophiles, which is awful. And I think bringing this to the forefront, making people realize how real it is and how dangerous the situation is for children and people that are in these circles. And I think that's why it's so important. So Ed, what are your first thoughts about this situation, especially when it first started to hit the news there with the jury going against these priests? What are your thoughts?
Oh, boy, my thoughts. Well, when I first heard about this grand jury report that came out, and it was all over the news, 300 priests, 1,000 victims, right away you think, well, boy, great, it's something, they're doing something here. Isn't this wonderful? Then I started looking into it, and you see that even with 300 priests, and if you read the report itself, or at least the first 16 pages, the introduction, the grand jury themselves say there's a lot more priests involved than 300, and there's a lot more victims. They're saying thousands more victims. But then you'll look a little deeper, and you see that there's only been 2 arrests, and it's business as usual, even with this report. And the grand jury seems so sincere. If you read the whole thing, they really want to make some changes, and they talk in plain, simple English too. It's not legalese. So that's my thinking. It's just business as usual, even with this great grand jury report and the big press conference and all that.
Now, for those who are aware of the situation, it could give a short overview of how this came to this, that there was this abuse on, and that who's heard or paying attention to the news and what's the situation going on.
Well, in 2016, I handled the grand jury in the state of Pennsylvania to look up this abuse. I think it's 6 different dioceses in Pennsylvania, and the jury, to heart. And they even say, listen, we worked very hard. You don't get paid a lot of money, and what they discovered is, like I said, 300 priests. They named 300 priests. They're going back from 1964 until the present. So many of these cases are beyond the statute of limitations, which means that the crime so long ago that you can no longer enforce the laws, which is a good policy. I like the statute of limitations laws because, if you're accused of something that happened 20 years, hey, how can I put on a defense? I don't have my documents. I don't have, you come back 20 years later, you want to accuse me playing up that. I'm a defense investigator. I'm usually work for the defense. I have a soft spot for the defense. 300 priests that they named that were involved in this and 1,000 victims. Now, and only 2 arrests, And if you look charged this 900-page grand jury report, it's horrific, okay? There's, I don't know how much you want to get into, man, but there was this one thing about this priest grooming middle school kids to engage in oral sex with him, and he was teaching them about how Mary, Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, had to bite the umbilical cord, and how she had licked Jesus clean, and the kind of team was used to groom these children or accept oral sex. There's another case where a priest confessed, and he says, I did these ways. Please help me. And rather than him, they covered it up. And this widespread cover-ups where the archdiocese first puts their reputation before the victims. In many cases, hiring private investigators to dig up dirt on these victims. There was another case where a priest again confessed, and he was removed, after significant bad behavior. But then after he was removed from the priesthood, they gave him a letter of recommendation so he can go get a job at Disney World. It's so outrageous. It's beyond your brain can't accept. Your brain can't function when you're reading this. How outrageous it is.
Yeah, I thought this information is almost shocking for people to comprehend, especially churchgoers, people who are part of the Catholic Church. They look at these men, these priests, as their leadership, as their example of how they should be walking out their faith life. And so for them to comprehend that these men are fallible, these evil, depraved creatures that prey on children, it's shocking to a lot of people.
Yeah, I grew up in a Catholic church. I grew up in a Catholic church in the Bronx, the Blessed Sacrament. I went to grammar school, Blessed Sacrament School, Blessed Sacrament Church. It's the same school that Sotomayor, the Supreme Court Justice, came out of. One of our cardinals that came out of our church later on had these same type of allegations against him. I didn't witness anything there firsthand. I do kind of recall some of the kids who were altar boys saying to me, just kind of like groaning when they would see the priest and say like, oh. And I'd say, well, what? I said, I'm thinking about becoming an altar boy. And they'd say, oh, you don't want to do this. You don't want to get involved. And so I look back at that. I wonder. I'll tell you, when I moved from the Bronx, from Blessed Sacrament to St. Clair's grammar school on Staten Island, there was a priest there, man. Dude, let me tell you something. One of the first days I was in this school, and I was a street kid from the Bronx, suddenly in this all-white neighborhood in Staten Island, this white Catholic school on Staten Island, and there was this bald-headed priest who shaved his head, which was very unusual back then. And this was like 74, 75. Very unusual, like Kojak was. Now everybody shaves their head, but this priest with a shaved head, bald shaved head, used to grab the young boy headlock and like start massaging them and talk to them face to face with his mouth, against his boy's mouth. And I saw this, and I'm never doing this to me, man. They're not going to go near me with this, but just so inappropriate. But everyone just talked about, so other so and so. That's just how he is, ha ha ha. And even today, looking back, I talk to people who went to that church who says, oh, there was wrong with him. He did nothing wrong. It's totally unacceptable behavior. I wouldn't accept it if you went up to my kid and started doing that, or if I did that to your kid, no one would accept this. But for some reason, like you said, these priests are treated like greater than walking on water.
Yeah, I mean, and I understand people want to see the best, and especially the people that they respect the most. But it's allowing a door to be opened for these predators to absolutely have the environment that they can prey on children and get away with it. And oh man, just really just shocking. Really, is what it is.
Yeah, and we see now that it's systemic. You know what I mean? It's systemic across the church. As far as the Vatican, we were talking about Ratzinger, the Pope Benedict, last pope, which was unusual for a pope to ever resign. It's never happened in my lifetime. I've never heard of that. Suddenly we have popes resigning. But this guy, we were just talking off the air, man. His brother ran the Vatican choir. Ratzinger's brother, Pope Benedict's brother, ran the Vatican choir, and there was a scandal there where there were 200 of these choir boys were molested over the course of the Vatican choir. There's no way that Ratzinger wouldn't be aware of this. The sheer number. There's no way on the face of the earth you could have 200 kids in a choir being molested and word not getting around that you're not hearing about this. It's impossible. And the same thing in the state of Pennsylvania, which is such a small state, and there's only 6 archdioceses there, that 300 victims, 300 priests they're covering up for, and 1,000 documented victims, and they're saying there could be thousands more. There's no way that this word doesn't get out and that this isn't known. It's known amongst that group, just like if it happened in the radio host community. We know people that are weirdos, and word gets around. It's systemic.
Yeah, exactly. And I think whenever people look at all these charges coming out against the Catholic Church, for example, we can fall into the slippery slope of, oh, this is only happening in the Catholic Church. And that is not true. This is happening in all branches and iterations of Christianity. Protestant churches have deep undercover things going on where they're covering up these situations because they have an infrastructure that if anybody found out that they were hiding the abuse of a child from one of their subservient or their underlings, then it would just destroy the structure. And so it's just like a custom where they must hide it. They must protect the priests and keep the word from getting out because it would really challenge the entire system or the entire infrastructure of the church. And I think that's what we're starting to see here. People are starting to question the fact that, hey, if there are 200 kids getting molested in this just church choir or these thousands of kids getting molested up in Pennsylvania, there has got to be some higher ups in the body of the church that absolutely are aware and are absolutely aiding and abetting the cover up of these atrocities.
Well, yeah, look in the news just recently. We saw where the EPA chairman, or I guess, yes, chairman of the
At Ritual, we know what goes into the holiday season. The potluck planning, the gift giving, the spreadsheets. So this new year, take a moment for yourself with science-backed support that puts you first. So whether you're focusing on supporting foundational health with a clean vegan multivitamin or supporting your gut health with Symbiotic Plus, do it with 30% off your first month at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. At Ritual, we know what goes into a magical holiday season. The potluck planning, the gift giving, the spreadsheets. This new year, take a moment for yourself with simple, daily rituals that help you put your foundational health at the top of your to-do list. Rituals Essential for Women 18 Plus Multivitamin is a clinically backed multivitamin featuring 9 high-quality key essential ingredients to help you fill key nutrient gaps in your diet. Or maybe you're stressing your daily protein intake, or you want to double down on support for your gut microbiome. From plant-based essential protein to 3-in-1 pre, pro, and postbiotic strains with Symbiotic Plus, Ritual helps you focus on supporting your body after a long season of juggling everybody else. And for a limited time, do it with 30% off a 3-month supply at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
PA, right? Scott Pruitt, how he traveled to Vatican over there, and he visited with Cardinal Pell. First we hear that he had one secret dinner with Cardinal Pell. And then Cardinal Pell was under all this investigation and it's in Australia, so they can't come right out and say what kind of the charges are. But, they hint around enough. You know what it is. It's child sexual abuse. He was charged right after this visit with Pruitt. And then we find out later on from whistleblowers in Pruitt's office that the whole trip was hosted by Pell. Pell met them at the airport. Pell took them out for dinner every night. Pell was meeting them at the hotel room. So, this whole thing was Pell. So the thing is, you got these guys, and again, there's no way, if you're on an investigation for these kind of charges, there's no way you don't know, okay? Because the cops aren't, they're talking to your friends, they're talking, they're interviewing people around you. Word gets back to you, you're under investigation. They might have even contacted him. He might be aware of the victim. The victim told him, I'm going to the police. So he knows what's going on. But yet he's meeting with people in the White House, people in the president's cabinet, right out in the open. So they have this kind of political power and influence that they can get away with this. And that's at the highest levels. But if you read this, again, this Pennsylvania report, this grand jury report, it talks about how there were sincere local cops who were investigating this, wanted to make arrests, but yet they deferred to the Catholic Church and their internal investigations and the hopes that they were going to handle this win. And nothing was ever handled. All they did was cover up, blame the victims, and shuffle the priests around, put the priests into therapy, and then say, well, another priest went out with him, friends who lived with the guy. And said, no, he's great, he's fine now, let's to another. The cover up is, and also, too, just stop and think of this. You're in what's that called? A community, the parish, right? The parish. You got the police chief and saying, let's say the police chief is a Catholic or his wife is a Catholic, and they're going in there for confession. They've confessed sins and crimes to this church. Again, those things get around. So now that there's that. You can't go and meet with a priest, confess your deepest, darkest secrets, your deepest, darkest sins, your crimes, who knows what, you're cheating on your wife, what are you confessing to, that you've done something on the job that's on your heart because it's unethical, and then you have to go back to that same parish and try and investigate them for a crime, and just think of the conflict of interest there. It's beyond any kind of payoffs and corruption that you could have. This is a huge conflict, because this is someone you confided into. This is someone you respect. This is a big problem. This is a big problem, and I don't even know how it can be dealt with, because we can't count. Even though in this report the grand jury members, they're saying, well, we think that they're sincere now, and the church wants to make a new effort to expose us, and that's how we got these two that we can convict. But it's a systemic problem from the top that who do we rely on? We rely on the Catholic Church from the top down to make changes in all this, and turn a new leaf, you know what I mean, to try and overturn them. We're going to rely on the abusers, on the criminals, in order to you know what I mean, to police themselves. What do we do?
I mean, you're absolutely right. That's a terrible conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Chiefly, just passion or whatever, but what did chiefly a very Catholic man, and he in that very time, they're not going to want to come and destroy the church that they have been involved with for many, many years. And so there's that aspect, yes, of that population in that society or little town or city that are protecting each other, because if you air the dirty laundry of your priest, he's going to air your dirty laundry every time you went and confessed you cheated on your, whoever, or, every time you went and did something awful, and the only person who knows is the guy that, might possibly also have some dirty laundry in his closet as well. It just is it's a complete conflict of interest. And you're bringing out something I think is really important, is the political tie that the Catholic Church has, the political strength that the Catholic Church has that can kind of pull strings. You mentioned that there's only been 2 arrests or just a handful of arrests in this case. And that's really interesting to me, because, of course, the Catholic Church has been a very strong political figure historically. They're one of the biggest intelligence gathering forces in the planet, because you have people who would go and they would confess to the priest throughout history, and it was used as a form of intelligence gathering. And so there's always been that kind of the church dipping their toes into the political realm. Always there, they always influence. And so, what are your thoughts on the church being involved in politics and having a say to maybe stop arrests or be like, hey, we're going to conduct our own internal investigation? How can this be allowed to go on, and what that political?
Excellent question, but the other thing, until we stop, because you mentioned the police chief or the police captain, okay, who they can shut down investigations just with a look. You know what I mean? The lieutenant in charge, the captain in charge can shut down an investigation just by looking at the cops, calling them in. You know what I mean? And, they get that drift right away. These cops know when they're risking their promotions and stuff like that, and most of them go along with it. But just imagine this: let's say the police captain is an atheist. Okay, fine. He doesn't even like the church. He thinks it's a big joke. What about the mayor? The mayor could be a devout Catholic. The prosecuting attorney could be a devout Catholic. Or one church. Okay, you just stand next to that the cardinal or the priest or the bishop. You just stand next to them in a photo op. You're going to get all the votes from that church. And one little church with 200 members, or I got a Catholic church right around the block here, must have like 3,000 members. Okay, one little photo op with this gets enough votes for that guy. It's swing votes. Just my little radio show, I control swing votes for these candidates. They come here and kiss my butt. Just imagine what a church with 2,000 members in a local assembly, vote, election, or a local mayoral election. The huge power. And what do you do? There's a separation of church and state. You're not supposed to do it. You can take away their tax-free status. But no one does. The same people who would take away the tax-free status are the people that are benefiting from those. What do you do? Nothing. We can't do. What can we do?
I mean, that is one of the questions that were being asked in the comments as people are watching this interview. Is there's like, well, how do we stop the abuse of these children? What is there even that people can do? And I think I would like to touch on that just for a moment. Is for people with children that are Catholic, for example, and they might even be in that area. What would you suggest they do to protect their children?
Well, yeah, anybody, not just Catholics, anybody, because look at the McMartin preschool and all of the finders, I've been doing a lot of shows about that lately, and daycares and middle schools, Boy Scouts, you know what I mean? Anywhere where there's kids, this is where they're looking. And I the main thing is to have a relationship with your child where you can talk about all these things openly. Where I know anything happens to my kid, she's going to come running to me first, no matter what. We've always had an open relationship. But even in that case, there's relatives and stuff like that who can gain your child's trust and just take advantage. So what do we do to protect our kids? You got to guard them like a hawk. You know what I mean? What else can you do? And you got to be a helicopter parent. What else can you do if you want to voice the statistics? Like mine, it's like 1 out of 4 little girls are raped and like 1 out of 5 little boys before you get to college. And you go to college, you got a 1 out of 5 chance of getting raped. People talk about getting raped in prison. Yeah, you got raped in college too. So what can you do, man? You just got to talk to your kids and raise them. For some reason, thank God, I've always, as a kid growing up, I've always kind of seen this coming at me. Like, hey, what's going on here? This is weird. I remember I told a story on the air about going to this movie theater where there was obviously these adults were molesting these little kids in this movie theater in the balcony. And this is old-fashioned movie theater back in the Bronx, back in the 70s and 60s. They used to have a balcony back there, And I went up there once and I just got the whiff right away. I knew, man, this is no place to be. But, other kids aren't, I guess, I don't know. They don't have that sixth sense, or they're just not warned by their parents. Got to talk to your kids, because what else can you do?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of kids. They might have that mentality of, I can handle the situation, or I can go to places that my parents don't know about, and it puts them in a dangerous, compromising situation where maybe they feel like they would get in trouble if they told their parents that they're going to a certain place, or they were hanging out with a certain person that was starting to groom them for the predation. But I think that's definitely something that people need to be very protective of their children. And you're right, not only in the Catholic Church and not only in that situation, just because it's being aired on mass media, but we're in a world full of predators. I know you look in a lot of the political realms, like the PKs and the Pizzagate, that kind of stuff, of sexual misconduct with political leaders as well. Could you maybe comment on that? And is there maybe a cross protection happening with these higher up people that might not necessarily be Catholics, but because of the same interests and advantage of young children that somehow might be with the Catholic leaders are all hiding it?
Yeah, absolutely. We know from the WikiLeaks and also from that Podesta was friends with people, Republicans, that were also child molesters and stuff like that. We know about what went on in Haiti which was like right in your face. You know what I mean? This woman, a friend of the Clintons, she's trying to flee the country with 30 little kids. You know, like, and then the Clintons get all involved, and the lawyer she hires was involved in child prostitution. So yeah, you know, obviously at the high levels, and I guess a lot of it has to do. They get to that high level because of blackmail, you know, and they have stuff on them, so they let it in. It does seem to be that, and you got to wonder too, that you look at all these priests who are molesting these little kids, right? Now, you and me are both heterosexual men. Like, I'm sure neither one of us have had 100 sexual partners in our life, but you hear about some of the priests molesting these little kids, and they've molested like 150 kids, 200 kids. There's something more there than just sexual gratification. There's some kind of demonic spirit. There's something they're getting out of this that we don't understand, or we can't see what they're doing, or what the benefit is. Something driving them to go molest this incredible kids in incredible horrific ways. And I hate to graphicationalize this. There's a story about a little boy who put crabs on his genitals. Crabs from the ocean. Now, in my wildest dreams, I can't imagine any kind of sexual gratification from that, or any kind of excitement. What would motivate you to do that? I would cringe seeing that. But there's something in that causes them to want to do that. And just like you said, you hear these stories in Pizzagate, which are horrific, with Podesta and all these characters and shipping kids around with in Ubers, and they're going to be in the pool. All this bizarre stuff. What is it? It's beyond blackmail. It's beyond sexual gratification. It's beyond. They're into something really seriously evil, man. And what do you think that is? Because there's something more.
Well, okay, so of course there's the surface. What if they're just, masquerading priests that are actually devil worshippers, and they're just, infiltrated the church system, and then they are using the structure of the system to perpetuate their rituals, and they're somehow feeding off of the just awful things that they're doing to these children. That's, obviously the very first thing that comes to mind. One thing I think of is, if you ever studied into, for example, Rasputin, back in Russia, there was a sect of Orthodox religion that he followed for a short period of time called Kalisti, I believe it is. And it's basically this religious sect that had these ecstatic rituals where it was full of like all these sexual orgies and all this kind of crazy stuff. And their justification was they get more grace from God. They get more get holiness by doing these mass sin events where they all mentally and physically commit sins, basically say, oh, God's grace is so amazing, and so we can then just do these giant, religious rituals, sexual rituals, that it was just part of their faith and their religion, and that's why you see Rasputin always associated with such weird ritual vagrancy and stuff. And so maybe they have the mindset, maybe it's not necessarily, I call that Satan worshiping, just you've deceived yourself and it'll kind of justify it. But, it could kind of like that. Maybe they're looking at, if we commit these sins, we're heaping on more grace onto ourselves, which is so sickening, that mentality. Of course, I believe that there's a really a propensity for sexual misconduct for particularly Catholic priests because they aren't marrying. Right. It's not really the standard for Catholic priests to have a family. So there's definitely that sexual just thing in that they don't have a wife, a family. They're not going out and taking care of those bodily needs that we all have. They're just really like forcing it down, and then they're acting out in these really sick, grotesque ways. I think that play this is, just there's not an outlet for that for many of these priests, and so it probably turns them into really sick people behind closed doors whenever they hold themselves back anymore, and then they have to find a really gross, awful, evil way to satisfy that lust.
Fascinating. Both of us are Christian, and I got saved in the Assemblies of God, and then I became an evangelist. I traveled to tent ministry for many years, and just think. Now, this kind of a bizarre teaching where it's the greater the sin, the greater the forgiveness. If you or I were to say that to each other, we would smack each other in the heads. What the hell are you talking about? But for them to cultivate that. They're all a little deviant, you know what I mean? In order for that that theory to take root, man, there's a sickness behind it. And part of that, too, I hate to say it, too, because I hate to be bashing homosexuality, but the Catholic Church the priesthood became a haven for homosexuality. And that's an ingredient to all this too that we can't overlook. And there was a whole thing too. It came out in La Repubblica, this Italian newspaper, where there was a gay scandal at the Vatican, where gay male prostitutes were blackmailing the Vatican over there. It came out in a big report that Ratzinger read as well. So there's that, and when you look to in Boston, where a lot of all this bubbled up and came out, the investigations in Boston, and the priests and again the homosexuality and the pedophilia there, in these seminaries in Boston, they were openly homosexual in seminaries, and they had pictures of like Menudo and Backstreet Boys posters in their rooms and stuff like that. It was like open that they had this interest. Which is, again, it's against the teachings of the Catholic Church, just, on its face.
Yeah, I definitely think homosexuality present in the Catholic Church definitely makes sense to tie into this whole topic. It's the perfect place for somebody, you have convents of men all secluded together or just women. And then you have the altar boys. It's the perfect place for somebody who is attracted to young boys or to men to be around them all the time. And I'm not in any way saying that, it's a widespread thing that, there's of course homosexuals in the Catholic Church. But there's a lot of people who are not, and they don't agree or support, that lifestyle. But at the same time, I can see how it's something that's perpetuated. You said, you grew up in the Catholic Church. You were offered the opportunity to be an altar boy. And we see statistically children and boys that have been molested and have been, somehow abused by an older male. The likelihood of them going into a homosexual lifestyle is many, many times greater than anybody who haven't gone through any of those experiences. So do you think that is something that plays into this, that these priests are perhaps taking advantage of these children, and then these altar boys are growing up and seeing the priesthood as their outlet to become maybe the figure that they wrongly put trust in, or perhaps they had a very sick, weird love relationship with an elder man there, and so in the mind, they're saying, I want to be just like this guy. I want to be just like this friend of mine who's been nice to me, we know that's using him and abusing him. Is there that perpetuation, you think, with the Catholic Church and altar boys and the way that priests interact with them?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I don't even know where the concept of altar boys comes from, really not the Bible. And with this business of boys choirs, too, I don't know where it comes from either. This is rife for abuse. Why does that even exist? If you want to end somebody's problems, you can start right there. Okay, this whole idea of altar boys is unnecessary for any, I have an ex-girlfriend who I love. As a matter of fact, and she took me to church on the day I got saved, on my birthday in 1989. And she had a little boy, and she says, "Oh, I want my little boy to be an altar boy." I said, "What the hell would you want that for? That's crazy," because she was still involved with the Catholic Church back then. But this idea you're talking about, where the kids, they saw their priests abusing either themselves and it creates a baseline of acceptability. Just like if you grow up and your parents did certain things, alcohol or beating, spanking, it creates a baseline of acceptability. And in the back of your head, even though you know it's wrong, it's a baseline for your own parenting, saying like, well, my parents did it, so it's not that bad. My parents let me have alcohol when I was 12 years old. I had a sip of beer, so I'll let my kids do it. So it's the same thing. You grow up having this kind of abuse. You think it's in some way in your head, does become acceptable. And you're more susceptible to abuse others. Hey,
So another aspect of this that I definitely wanted to hear you out on is the lack of convictions and arrests not only in the Catholic situation with these priests. You said there was only like 2 arrests made, but just overarching, why is it so hard to convict people and to get justice for the mistreatment of these children?
I got another one for you. I had a personal experience. I had a client whose father was molested in the Catholic Church. It really doesn't matter, but I believe it was up in the Boston area. This case took place all over the country. The family, the son and the daughter lived up the northeast, up in the northwest, but the father was molested, I believe, in the northeast, and he sued the school where he was molested. A whole bunch of people were molested at the school, and the law firm got the highest civil judgment on record from this school, this Catholic school, where the father was molested. And my job was to, because there was a dispute between the two, the father died, passed on, so we were trying to get the estate, how much was collected and how can we get our hands on it for the client. And that I found, settled. It was a lawyer's side. We were the highest judgment ever in a case against the Catholic Church. We went for the money. There was no money because all he did was declare bankruptcy. The school did nothing. So even you think, headlines, judgment is great judgment. And I saw those headlines all over the place. I thought there was a lot of money. I was going to get a check. Okay, there was no money. They just declared bankruptcy. And it's the same thing with the prosecutions. We talked about it before. That the police investigating these cases over and over defer to the Catholic Church, and that was it put out as a policy, by the way, again by Ratzinger. He did a letter to all the bishops. I think it was 2001. Yeah, 2001 letter to the bishops. I have it in my notes, where he outlined how these cases should be handled. And he says, we got to first off keep it within house. Don't turn over information to the police, even when you know there's a criminal activity. And by the way, too, they were expelling priests for stealing, for adult sexual behavior, all that kind of stuff. They, minor infractions, they were getting kicked out. But this was covered up because it would damage the reputation of the church and cause scandal. In fact, those were some of the words that say, if you read 16 pages in the introduction to the 900-page report, avoid scandal. These words appeared over and over. By the way, in different, we know this was a pattern. This was policy from the top down, not from the bottom up. So, yeah, you're right, man. No one's getting prosecuted on this. 2 people out of 300. Are you kidding me? When there's like another, they said there's way more than 300. And that's just Pennsylvania, Just imagine, more populated areas, like New York City or New Jersey or Florida. Everything goes down in Florida is crazy. So how do we, I don't know. Well, what do we do?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most scary, shocking aspects of finding out this 600 priests only in that Pennsylvania area that we know of. Then what about the rest of the country? God forbid the rest of the world. We're in the Western world here, and you think that this was the place we're most protected from sexual misconduct and predators. And we're uncovering it here just because we have the infrastructure and the investigating, capability to find out about these things. But countries, third world countries, for example, I grew up in the Philippines, Ed. Okay. I grew up in Manila, a 90% Philippines, and the power structure there is so interesting. If you have speaking out against the local church, anybody speaking out against the Catholic faith, they are ostracized. They are ignored from their family. You obviously growing up with a Catholic background, you understand how hard it is to get Catholic, how big of a deal it is whenever you leave. And so for people to speak out in third world countries, much less the Western world, is just the things that I like to imagine what's going on in these institutions that have the funding, the infrastructure, the buildings, the places to hide the misconduct. It's horrifying. And this is not with just 300 priests. This is just the tip of the iceberg that I think is in the public eye. Of course, this is something that's been going on for many, many years. For example, in a town literally that I grew up in and lived near, Owensboro, Kentucky, there was a young man and killed himself on steps of a Catholic church because he was molested. Just in 2012, just killed himself, and then the priest was then arrested on sex abuse charges. And he drove this kid as he grew into adulthood to then off himself, probably because of the awful things that he had done to him. And whenever you think about just the mentality that victims have whenever they are growing up in the faith, and it's a big deal to, not outside of the faith or to ever question your priest or question the authority structure. It's almost an internal struggle that I can't even imagine having to go through, that many people do. Like, I can't even put my mindset in what they're thinking, because they don't want to offend their parents. They don't want to offend their grandparents, the Catholics, and the lineage that goes back years and years and years. If they come out saying, hey, this church is not all snuffed up to what it's supposed to be, think about that inner conflict that people are going through. And man, it makes me just so hurt for the people that are getting abused. And now, Ed, you're probably talking to somebody who's not come out about being abused. There's probably an audience member right now who's going to a Catholic church, or somebody who went through abuse as a child, or might know somebody going through abuse, and they're thinking to themselves, like, well, what do I do? So for people that we might be, talking to or in front of right now that have gone through abuse, what is your advice to them? How do they come out about it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because even in this report, too, these well-meaning grand jurors who took the job so seriously, they talk there about how so many of these kids, again, suicide, like you said, would turn to suicide, and would turn to drug abuse, and would get addicted to drugs, to deal with this kind of. And you see it on that TV show Intervention all the time. It's like 90% of the times these people are addicted to drugs because they were molested when they were a kid. So, if you're out there and you are a victim of this, one thing we could do is I could help you get a lawyer. We could always sue. I like that, man. I get a lot of these Me Too cases. I'm working on one right now where, we sue, and then people say, well, then you kind of, it's like hush money, but you make them pay. You know what I mean? You make them pay. So that's one thing you can avenge you. Now, therapy and stuff like that, you got to have good therapists, because I've been in New York and I've been here in Nevada, and I've seen good therapists and I've seen really bad ones. So that's always hit and miss too. As a matter of fact, this is working on right now was with a therapist who was abusing his patients. People who are victimizers, they got a radar, man, and they if you go to them with that victim mentality, you're gonna get abused on top of your first abuse. So where do you go, man? That's such a good question, man. Yeah, because again, too, you want to say turn to God. Turn to your faith and pray, and the leaders of the church, the elders of the church. But if you're in this situation, you've been inoculated from that. How many people do we both know that don't trust the church, that hate the church because of some experience that they had at a church where now they hate all churches and they don't want to hear it? And you see the pain. And you see the death of their soul when you try and talk to them and say, oh, no, let me tell you what I've been through, and where do you go, man? What do you think,
Well, I think, first of all, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I think it's absolute a plan from, Satan, the enemy, to put these just monsters in a position of authority, in a position of, hey, this is your spiritual leader. You need to look to this priest, this man, to tell you how to get closer to God. And then this just monster then abuses you, uses you, is the opposite of the example that, supposedly they're supposed to be. And it destroys people's faith in God. They don't understand that it is not God that is this sinfulness and evil wickedness of men. And I think that's why it's such a heartbreaking situation, because you see people all the time that are completely turned away from the faith because somebody in their life who professed to be a Christian did something awful like that. It did something so just opposite of what they professed that, if that's really what your God wants you to do, if that's what Christianity is all about, forget that. I'm done. I'm out. I'm going to, on my own way in the world. And, I think that what's heartbreaking is the situation. For somebody, what would I say to is just, I think very dangerous to be up and not talk if you've gone through, because for more things to happen, especially if you are, okay, I have this abuse, I've gone through this situation in the church, and I'm going to continue to be in that environment. So speak up about it. Tell people that actually do want to care and protect you. That these we see all the time with women who've gone through sexual abuse. It's not until they get married and their husband's there and they can be confident when that you find that they went through abuse in the first place. It's something people are very secretive about, and totally understand. This is something so awful. You want to wipe it from your memory. You suppress it. Same time, please understand that don't doubt about you don't doubt about the abuse a priest or an elder or pastor has done. You allowing that happen to somebody else. You are that person to weigh something that got with you to then maybe continuing on the abuse. And so please, if there's somebody that that is still in a leadership authority, still in a position that can perpetuate abuse like these priests, and for a fact, or you went through that abuse yourself, speak out about it. Call them out. People aren't going to allow their kids to go to a vacation Bible school if the pastor's been outed for really being inappropriate with the children, or the priest for going and putting kid in headlocks and massaging them. If you don't talk about it, you're in a way you might let it happen to somebody else, and obviously you don't want that to happen. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, but just think too, how about these people? Their family is still going to that church, and every week, every Sunday, they got to go see that priest that molested them. You know what I mean? Because nothing's happened to the priest. And if you read this report, a lot of these kids who did come forward and families who did come forward, they did come forward and nothing happened still. So, yeah, I would say before you go complaining to the church, because obviously there's no haven there, contact a good lawyer, or contact me. I'll put you in touch with a lawyer. And again, make the police reports. That couldn't hurt too. And it seems like, according to this Pennsylvania grand jury report, that they're saying that things seem to be changing and that people are having a different attitude, which I think too, compared to when I was a kid. Forget it. I remember we had this one incident where there was some kind of scandal going on at the church and the school, and the nuns went door to door to every family's house, and I remember that day they came to our house to meet with my parents, and it was like, God showed up, or the president was showing up. It was something like oh my God, it's these people are just so revered, and I guess they just came to tell my parents to keep their mouths shut or whatever it was. But I guess it's not that people have a different attitude nowadays. Thank God, and it does seem to be changing, right, little by little. Maybe in 10 years from now, this will be a less of a problem.
Yeah, we can only hope so. Of course, I have my personal opinions that the world's degrading in terms of morality instead of improving. And so I think this is something that might even become more exposed, but in a way, it's going to come out to light, I feel like. I think we're in the information age where people can speak out about these things, whether or not there's a conviction. But at the same time, I also think that whenever everybody gets exposed and you find out that your whole society's infiltrated and run by pedophiles, it's not going to make it so, we're going to out the pedophiles. Those pedophiles are going to start fighting back, and they're going to try to, keep their way of life. And of course, we see over in California, there was recently a man running for the governorship that was advocating I forget what he dubbed it. Basically, he was saying, yeah, it's fine, I like little boys, but I'm running for the governorship. Vote for me. Free love. Any iteration of relationships is deemed okay. And I think that's a slippery slope that we see with with some of these agendas that are being pushed in terms of, first, it's widely accepted homosexual relationship will be very widely accepted, even taught in schools as very this is exactly how things should be. And then from there, when does a relationship start to get propagated as something that's permissible? And that freaks me out, especially when you look at alternate views of relationship, alternate views of love and stuff that's talked about today's culture. People are going to start coming out. Totally natural for me to be attracted to a little girl because I view myself as a little boy, or the way that the mentality and the very you define yourself and nothing is wrong because it's all based on self-perception. I think that's the slippery that I'm headed toward. That makes me a little nervous. And especially, and I don't know if you caught that case of they're trying to run for the governorship propagating young relationships and liking little. What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, I read all about that. I read his Wikipedia page and his manifesto, and he had a suicidal pedophile a group that because they're so tormented by their pedophilia that they're suicidal over it. Fascinating guy. I don't think he'd get many votes, but he did have a large group, you know. And I mean, they were all so. And let's not get too distracted by that nut. I don't think he's going to go anywhere. But you know, in the public schools today, you know, I get to it. But in the, you know, my own daughter, you know, good Christian girl. She got baptized 9 years old, man. You know, she loves the Lord. She loves her Bible. And they teach in the public schools that, well, you know, it's wrong to be homosexuals and it's wrong to, you know, discriminate. I agree with all that. We shouldn't be bullying anybody. We shouldn't be discriminating against anybody. But then it becomes an acceptance of a lifestyle that's, again, is unhealthy if you look at all the statistics and stuff like that. And if you're in that kind of lifestyle, listen, I don't care what you do. You do whatever you want, but it is something you want to look, you know, there's reasons behind it for many times, like you said before. So, and you're right. And I can see them portraying that same thing. Well, you know, listen, you're born this way. You're born with an interest in children. And look, poor Michael Jackson. He never had a childhood. He was such an innocent. So, you know, for him to be sleeping with little boys, well, it was innocent the way he did it. And even if there was some touching and talking and, you know, mutual, you know, it was just innocence because, you know, all the time. The Michael Jackson fans obsessively contact me because of the shows I did about Michael Jackson. So, yeah, that's out there, and it's right around the corner. I don't see any turning back. People accept it, you know, and I do a lot of shows about, you know, Jeffrey Epstein, you know, he's a well-known name now, but when his shows from 4 years ago, nobody knew who the hell he was. I went to try and find a guest about him. There was no one to interview about it. And when I talk about his connections with Trump, you know, and Trump's relation, I just did a show just recently with a woman who was 16 years old. She was a model in New York City when Trump hit on her. And she talks about how Trump had a 17-year-old girlfriend, this Russian girl named Nadia, who is his girlfriend. And there's even more that we haven't reported on. But people who are diehard, you know, fans of Trump will say, well, I don't care. You know, who cares about that? You know what I mean? There's an acceptance of this kind of behavior, again, because you're political proclivities. You know what I mean? I don't know, man.
I think one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing about interesting is absolutely the LGBTQ trans community is a absolute minority here in the Western world. They're percent of a percent. But because they're so vocal, because they're outspoken on their thoughts and their feelings towards, you know, politics or figures or whatnot, and the necessity that they are requiring to, you know, for people to be teaching these lifestyles in schools, what we're seeing, I think, is the propagation of a mentality and a mindset that otherwise would remain a minority and a percent of a percent. But now, because you're bringing it to the forefront of children's minds in school, you're letting them read books that's how homosexual relations work, how lesbian, you know, how does that, you know, how to do stuff, you know. Whenever you put that in front of the public's mind, just for the mindset of, oh, we don't want them to be bullying, we don't want them to be, you know, looking at them fearfully, and so that they put these books in the public school and the libraries, and they make it part of the curriculum, basically. I believe you're going to see an uptake in the amount of people that are coming out as, oh, I've decided I'm LGBTQ or homosexual or trans, because otherwise they would have never even had that mentality or that mindset, just because it's been set before. Under the guise of, hey, we don't want bullying, or we don't want, you know, you to look at these people fearfully. Just because you're now teaching kids, hey, this is how a homosexual relationship works, and this is why it's okay, and you don't have to be afraid of homosexuals. You're going to see a lot more homosexuals in the next 10, 15 years, just because it's now become part of the curriculum in public schools, and it's become part of the, you know, PC, very, you know, accepting, encouraging these lifestyles. It then encourages who would have gone to that stuff, and I think become part of that lifestyle.
I hear you, man. Hey, look at this whole thing with the transgender bathrooms. You know, like how many transgenders are? You know, you see a few, but how many are there out there that have to go to the bathroom in public that often anyway? That we need such a whole nationwide hubbubaloo about this issue. And again, like you said too, especially in your teenage years, exploding hormones, stuff like that. There's all that sexual view, and if you're a young boy, like even a trunk is attracted to you, you get low and you get turned on. There's all that you confuse sexual to anything really, and then add into that. Okay, this whole business about the transgender, where they actually started giving female and male hormones to teenagers and stuff like that when they're in this confused state. I remember that TV show Jazz, the little boy who was a transgender little boy there, and they're talking to him about getting surgery at this young age. And it was about how, his penis wasn't large enough he hadn't grown enough for his penis to be large enough to invert it. If you ever knew how they do this stuff, if you want to get into that, it's just unbelievable. And the little boy is saying, well, I don't know. I've never had a sexual experience. I don't know if I would. My God, you're right. The kid doesn't know. Why are you giving this kid's hormones and talking about castration and animation of your body? When a huge percentage of these people, adults who go through transgender surgery, transformation, regret it and reverse it, and wind up in the sex industry, okay, and wind up working as sex workers, and on disability. It's unfathomable the number of problems that come with that kind of lifestyle. And I got a good friend right now she's going from a female to male transgender. She's getting male hormones. And I know she's not listening to the show, otherwise I wouldn't say this. But the reason why she's going through all this confusion is because she was raped just recently. And then within a year went to this whole thing, and she's seen a doctor. Oh, wonderful thing like that. Here's some testosterone shots for you. When I can diagnose what the cause of this is, just from being a friend. A professional can't diagnose this, so you're right, man. I was feeling a little encouraged before you talked me out of it there, but you're right, man. You're right. It's getting worse, because that whole end of things, because they got the PR team, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's the the PR team, the propagation unit. They're definitely, there's an agenda being pushed here.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, along with the homosexual trans agenda, you see the rise in child abuse because it's interconnected in a lot of interesting ways. And so I think that's another aspect of this that is kind of, it's scary, So anyways, with that topic, I want to get back to the Catholic Church. We're just getting around an hour interview here, and so I didn't want this to be too long of an episode because I would like a lot of people to watch. This is a very important topic, and so I wanted to hear your thoughts out on. First, you mentioned the as one of the first to design, and of course, there's a lot of the previous pope to sexual misconduct trials and different allegations against the church under his leadership. I wanted to ask you to maybe expound a little bit on your thoughts on him and the different controversies surrounding him and his ousting. And then, since we're talking about the current Catholic Church and the priests that are currently under the current leadership of Pope Francis, I wanted to hear your thoughts as well.
Well, yeah, like we said before, Ratzinger, what do you call it? Where's those notes? I lose them already? I did. Oh, here we go. Yeah, Ratzinger, brother. Yeah, like I said, his brother was acquired $200 gains. This Vatican leaks, like WikiLeaks, Vatican leaks about this gay male escort service that was blackmailing the Vatican. And then, Ratzinger was the one who was behind the protocol. When he studied all this, he created this protocol and sent it out to all the bishops in 2001 on how to handle and how to cover up these cases. And it's all the same thing. Don't cause scandal. Handle it in-house. So he's up to his neck in all this. They wanted the church to keep the authority over the investigations and not turning over to the police. So yeah, Ratzinger, and it's very unusual for a pope to resign. I've never heard of that before. So who knows what happened behind the scenes that we don't even know about. So what else was the question?
Yeah, what were you, that was the previous administration. Obviously, people can do a little bit of research and see that there's sexual misconduct related with that pope. But What are your thoughts on this current Pope? And I don't know if he's come out with public statements. The Catholic Church just recently came out denouncing it as atrocious moral failure. But it's all under the leadership of Pope Francis. I mean, are we in a better situation than the previous Pope, or is he just going to maybe perpetuate the cover-ups?
I think they're still perpetuating cover-ups, and despite what the Pennsylvania grand jury said, they have hope. The thing is, it's the same kind of thing. Like Pope Francis is up against the deep state of the Pope or the Vatican. You know what I mean? All the same people are in there. You know what I mean? They haven't all changed their stripes. They haven't all just suddenly seen the light. And then change their behavior. It's systemic. So I don't see any. Even if I know there was one thing about a statement to Ireland, because this was really horrible in Ireland, where this was going on over there galore, and there was some kind of an open letter or a statement issued to the children of Ireland who were abused. It's lip service. Why don't they turn over all these criminals? Like, I'm a defense investigator. I'm for the defense. But if you got this systemic crime in your organization, and you have facts, you have the evidence, turn them over, and turn over your internal reports and your internal documents to law enforcement, and put pressure on local law enforcement to prosecute these people. And by the way, just think, if the local state attorney general down there in Pennsylvania did want to prosecute 300 priests, he couldn't even do it. They're not equipped to do it. They're not equipped to put on 300 trials overnight. This would be a huge undertaking. So, is there hope with the
I guess let me clarify, because I've seen comments from the audience. They're saying, well, better situation. Told Not Sold said, better situation. Both claim to be God on earth. And, there's some other people kind of, wondering but basically the persona that Pope Francis puts on is a lot more whitewashed than we saw with the previous Pope. We see, him trying to be a lot more active socially. He's he puts on the appearance of humility, and the way that he takes the big giant golden throne out and he puts a tiny little white seat in. So is this something that is going to encourage Catholics to be like, oh, we got a Pope that can actually deal with these problems, that can actually deal with maybe the sexual misconduct internally, because of just his outward appearance? And is it trusting in just this, the facade that the Pope might be putting up that could sway the Catholic populace into almost a false security, versus looking at the previous Pope? He looks creepy. He's a little older. He looks like Darth Sidious sitting on his throne in some pictures. So is it could his outward public persona be swaying people to put more trust in the Catholic Church and the authority structure therein than they probably should be?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like when you have a lot of police brutality in a black town, a black neighborhood. Well, let's put a black mayor in there. Let's put a black police chief in there. But it still continues. Nothing even slows down. It's the same exact thing. Let's put in a pope that's saying all the right things. Okay, but has he cleaned house? He can, right? What's stopping him? Nothing. He can clean house, man, and turn all these folks over. And until they do that, there's just so much, like you say, window dressing. You know what I mean? I like hearing what he says. I'm a social justice kind of guy, but you gotta, put up, do it, turn them over.
Yeah, because I definitely think that's an aspect. Is there can be a lot of lip service, from these men. They can say a lot of good things, but then whenever you look at these allegations that obviously, they were aware of misconduct going on, it was covered up for years and years and years. How can you talk about social justice when in your own infrastructure, in your own church, you are protecting child predators?
Right. But we have one grand jury for the state of Pennsylvania. Okay, we have to impanel grand juries in every state? No, we don't. They have the information. they could impanel a committee and expose all their folks and turn over. Say, we have 100 names here in New Jersey. We have names here in Florida. You know what I mean? But I out for these folks, guys, we've done internal investigations. We had the phone was sent to her and stuff. They could expose thousands, know who we're dealing with, they're so changed. You know what I mean? Let's say I was going to bad and stuff out in the street, nightclub. Man, now, I don't my past behavior. I'm forgetting. Why can't they do this? If something's really changed, expose all the evil you've done and turn it over. Turn it over. Shine the light on it. Rather than just put a new face up there and business as usual.
All right. Well, I'd like to wrap this interview up, and I'd like to hear your final thoughts on how do you think this situation is going to unfold? I mean, it's all over the news now. Is anything going to happen, or is it just going to be slowly swept under the rug, and it's going to be from the sky? People are going to forget, and then it's going to happen again, as it has in the past.
What are your
thoughts?
It's going to be business as usual, and I've already said that. The thing is, because listen, the news is reporting, oh my goodness, 300 exposed, 300 priests exposed, 1,000 victims, and I'm pretty sure you didn't hear before today. There's only been 2 arrests because no one's talking about that at all. And I had to go look it up 3 or 4 times to verify it to make sure, and it's in the report. It's in the final report too. Only 2 arrests, and that's never reported anywhere. There's a lot of this stuff with this reporting where they want you to think something's being done. And you can kind of sit back, all this stuff with QAnon, all this stuff, the coming storm. Something's being done. Trump is rounding up 1,400 pedophiles. But when you get into it and you look into it, it's all nonsense. Nothing's being done. And it's all just window dressing and talk. So this might be something just to lull us into complacency, too. They're working on it. They remember they exposed, they arrested. A lot of people probably think they made 300 arrests. Played the news. It did one of those polls like that guy, Lundberg, that people would say, oh, wow, they just arrested 300 people. You know what I mean? Ever since Trump came into office, look, they just arrested 300 priests. Well, first of all, this happened in 2016. They started this. It's a Democratic attorney general. So nothing to do with it. Still, no one was arrested. 2 arrests. Nothing. And we don't even know if there's any evictions in that. 200 arrests taken off. So, window dressing, business as usual. Make us think things happen. That seems to be a habit where they make us think great thing happening. People are getting rounded up and all this kind of stuff. None of that. And when you investigate those stories, you find nothing's really going on. These are old cases from years and years ago. And there aren't pedo rings being rounded up. These are typical massage parlor arrests and stuff like that. And those things with arm arrests. They just announced these 2,000 arrest Sessions did. And it turns out these were all internet complaints, 25,000 internet complaints. They finally got around to investigating. And again, those catch a predator type things, but nothing about rings getting taken down or pedo rings or anything. It's all, you're not really saving kids. If it's a sting operation with one of these catch a predator type things on the internet, seen any kid rescuing kids, you're chatting online, So, I'm not very encouraged. Okay, that's to be able to, and I had to read all this stuff to prepare for the interview. I'm not very, it's very discouraging.
Well, I can totally understand reading through those documents and finding out, really the nitty gritty details about this situation, about these abuses that are going on. Heavy thing, and a lot of people don't even want to hear interviews like this. They don't want to hear facts surrounding the situation because it means that they might have to speak up or do something. Actually have their head on a swivel in their own environment because there's people around. I can know our audience. We're in a very wicked, evil world, and if you're, you need to be even careful in your own church. Don't let your kids go to people's houses you don't intimate trust, and even the people need to have boundaries. You need to be very careful because this misconduct is the actions of these peers. It's happening not only in the Catholic Church, it's happening in many different schools, it's happening with family members, it's happening in the Protestant Church, it's happening in all forms and faces of religion. And you need to be careful because there are predators out there that look like normal people and they look like fun, I can trust them. And then you open that door for a predator to then ruin your child's life. And so I think everybody needs to be very careful. I think this conversation is very important because it wakes people up. It makes people know that, hey, even authority figures that put on this outward facade of holiness, righteousness, whitewashed, good boy type, thing, you need to be aware that even those men could be wolves in sheep clothing, and I think that's a very scriptural thing that we see. There are wolves in sheep clothing, and sometimes people don't want to admit that. They're looking for that, person covered in tattoos and piercings that looks like the bad guy, and that's not the case. And so I think this is a very important discussion. So thanks, Ed, for coming on and discussing this with me and our audience. Very heavy topic, very, very heavy indeed.
Yeah, thank you, Grant, for exposing this kind of stuff. It is important. You know what I mean? Listen, we gotta do it, right? Who else is doing it? So yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Ed, once again for coming on, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Now You See TV. I've been your host, Jake Grant, and until next time, be on the lookout and speak up, because it could save somebody from the abuse that care. Thank you for tuning in to Now You See TV.